Hey, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. I just noticed that I was wearing the same sweater in the introduction. That's all I wore today. It's a gorgeous day outside here in Calgary. I think it's like +5 or +6, and hopefully, hopefully, uh, let's talk about this. Speaking of weather, I'm like a lot of Canadians. I like to go down south, and vacation. Mexico is one of our favorite spots. We tend to alternate between Mazatlan and Puerto Vallarta. And this year, the weather's been so nice here in Calgary that Karen and I haven't felt the need to leave and go down south. So, and I'm kind of glad we haven't, because if we had, we probably would have ended up in Puerto Vallarta because we went to Mazatlan 2 years ago. So we kind of alternate between the two. Anyways, hopefully none of you guys or none of you folks got involved in that or caught up in that. Hope everybody's okay and that your friends and families. I did the circle around my group, and nobody was caught up in that. So hopefully you're in the same boat. You saw the title today, LNG and gun bans. I mean, I do the show on Thursday, so on Mondays I'm usually starting to think about what do I want to talk about, and because I want to do a little, monologue before taking calls. But this week, like what I saw on the news yesterday, there's only one thing I really want to talk about, and that's that LNG shipment that we got from Australia. I mean, I say it all the time. Like, Canada's not a serious country anymore, and yesterday, to me, that's peak lunacy. And so I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a great story, because I'm not speaking about LNG from an outsider perspective. I'm going to speak to you from an absolute insider. So in about 2016, 17, 18, I was working for a private company called Paraday Energy out of Alberta, and Paraday went public around 2018. And Paraday was advancing an LNG project out east in Nova Scotia called the Goulburn LNG project. And I was the vice president in charge of the engineering for that project. And so and Paraday was founded by a guy named Alfred Sorensen, and Alfred got his start doing LNG up in the Kitimat area. But Alfred saw an opportunity. He knew right back in like 2014-15 that there was an opportunity for Canada to sell LNG, liquefied natural gas, to Europe. And Alfred actually signed a contract he sold 20 years worth of liquefied natural gas to a German company called Uniper. Okay, 20 years. And it was a contract worth about $35 billion. And the contract, it's public, so I'm not disclosing anything that's non-confident here. Or confidential. It's public information. But the contract was kind of signed quietly in Nova Scotia without fanfare, because for the Germans, this was an admission, like more than a decade ago. This was basically an admission that their transition to green had failed, right? If we remember, the Germans jumped in with both feet. They shut down their nuclear plants. They shut down their coal-fired plants. They were going to do green, solar and wind, and it all failed. And so they needed quietly to acquire natural gas, and they were getting natural gas from the Russians, but we all know how that turned out. So they came to Canada and they made a deal with us, with Paraday at the time. So it went without fanfare. And then if you look at a map of Canada, there is a path. So natural gas from Alberta can go all the way to Ontario, then it can dip down into the US and come back up north through what's called the Maritime and Maine pipeline. That pipeline was built brilliantly because there was offshore gas in Nova Scotia, right, in the early 2000s. So there was offshore gas there. It was deep Panuke, coming to shore in Goulburn, Nova Scotia, and then going down to Nova Scotia and down to the US. But that pipeline was built to be reversible. So we had a path to get natural gas from Alberta all the way to Nova Scotia. And we had a contract. And not only did we have a contract, but this contract was so important to the German government that the Germans gave us loan guarantees. So all we had to do was build this facility. And in terms of building LNG facilities, in those days, we referred to it as, million metric tons per year of LNG. and we were going to build a 10 million metric ton per year facility, which is just a block, right? It's a cookie cutter stuff. I mean, you buy this, it's licensed by various companies around the world. You buy it, you get a company like KBR or whatever to build it, and the detail is like the ports and a few other little things. So we had it all figured out. We did the detailed, the basic front end engineering. We even had the permit to export. We had the permit to construct from the local Nova Scotia utility board. I mean, we had everything. The only thing we didn't have was proper support from Ottawa, because we had at that time, when we were getting ready to pull the trigger and build this thing, the German company that was giving the loan, the German government, which was giving the loan guarantees, asked a reasonable question. They're like, can we get some assurances that your government is behind this? And so when we tried to get assurances, nobody would give us like Trudeau blew us off and passed us on to Amarjeet Sohi. And anyways, I don't want to get into a whole ton of details on what happened, except to say that we got blocked at every step of the way by our own government, because our own government here in Ottawa was doing the same thing that the Germans had done years ago, which was going all in on green energy and net zero. And so, which brings me back to today, right? What happened yesterday? I mean, yesterday we had a shipment of LNG, liquefied natural gas, from Australia, shipped all the way to Canada. That's insane, right? And it traveled like, it must have been a 12-day journey to get that, probably longer, to get that LNG here, where we could have produced it in Alberta and shipped it over to Nova Scotia, or shipped the gas to Nova Scotia. You know what I mean? So we have it inside. And what's extremely frustrating about all of this is that right now, Carney and a delegation of people from Ottawa are like boarding planes as we speak. They're on their way to Australia, and they're on their way to India, and they're on their way to places like that to try and sell Canadian LNG. But the LNG they want to sell is the stuff that they're proposing that we produce up north in northern British Columbia, a project that's barely off the table, that's financed by the Chinese. You know what I mean? So I can't help but be frustrated, especially at the hypocrisy of Carney and others who lately have been talking about how we have to diversify the economy and not be dependent on the Americans. But they go as far as saying that we are going to build, Canadian infrastructure, and we're going to become our own best customers, right? Well, if we were going to be our own best customers, you would think that Quebec would buy oil from Alberta instead of from, Nigeria and Qatar. And you would think that New Brunswick and Nova Scotia would buy liquefied natural gas, same thing, from Alberta. So I'm sure you can sense the frustration. I just wanted to bring that up. I mean, the stuff, seeing LNG transported around the world to come to Canada when we have probably some of the largest reserves of gas and oil. Not probably, we have some of the largest reserves of gas and oil in the world, is absolutely insane. By the way, look it up, right? Look up where Goldboro is. It's just close to Antigonish, right? It's about an hour away from Antigonish. And people say, why would you have built a facility there? Well, like I said, there's a path to get the gas there, but amazingly, Goldboro, in terms of how close it is to Europe, how close is Nova Scotia to Europe compared to the Gulf of Mexico to Europe, is about 3 days of sailing closer. And so that's why we had a huge economic advantage over our American competitors. Now, we conceived of that project way back in 2013, 2014. We never built it. And like I said, they're built in like cookie cutter, chunks of like 10 million metric tons. In that same time, our competitors in the United States have built like 7 or 8 of these kinds of units. So just putting it out there. All right, I got our first call on the line. Once again, thanks for calling in. Let me know your name and where you're calling from, and shoot me a question or a comment. Go ahead.
Hi, Marty. How are you? This is Ed from Spruce Grove.
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I've met you a few times at a couple of rallies. My question is, my understanding, about 15% of oil flows through the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay. And who owns
Yeah.
And who owns Trans Mountain Pipeline?
So Trans Mountain used to be Kinder Morgan. Great question, by the way. So let me put some context, right? So Alberta produces about currently these days about 4.5 million barrels of oil a day. We keep here in Alberta for our own consumption about 500,000 barrels. We have like 5 or 6 refineries, and we keep some for ourselves, and we sell a bit of gasoline and jet fuel and stuff like that, which leaves about 4 million barrels to be exported. And that export capacity is mostly Keystone going straight south to the U.S., Enbridge going south and east to the U.S., and as you mentioned, Trans Mountain. The original Trans Mountain was built in the 1950s and 56, 57, and had a capacity of about 380,000 barrels a day. And so about a decade ago, Kinder Morgan wanted to double that capacity. So that's why we call TM, Trans Mountain, and then TMX, the expansion. It's the expansion that got blocked over and over and over by regulators, inadvertently, by First Nations, by governments, whatever. But eventually, Notley realized that Notley and Trudeau kind of realized that it did need to be built because the revenue from oil is just so significant. So, and Trans Mountain gave up. Kinder Morgan, the owner of Trans Mountain, gave up on trying to build it. And so Ottawa had to step in and buy the Trans Mountain existing pipeline and the design for the expansion. They bought them from Kinder Morgan and formed a Crown Corporation. So today, Trans Mountain is a Crown Corporation owned by the federal government that transports, like you said, about I don't know if it's as high as 15% of our production, but it's roughly 800,000 barrels a day are transported down that pipeline. It's useful. There's no doubt it's useful.
Okay, here's my question. My question is, if the Canadian government owns Trans Mountain pipeline, if Alberta becomes independent, could they shut it off?
Yeah, I mean, that'd be sure they could. I mean, they could shut it off just like they could shut off anything else. But great question. That probably would be one of the, I talked about this last week. If we have a referendum and we have our majority and we declare ourselves an independent state or country, we then have a negotiation with Ottawa, and part of the negotiation are what's our debt. What's our share of the debt that you want us to pay, and then we would give them a list of assets that we would want to buy. So federal assets in Alberta include the national parks, military bases, and I guess we'd add Trans Mountain to the equation excuse me, and say how much to buy Trans Mountain. And if they don't want to sell it to us, then I guess they'd be foolish not to keep operating it because it makes them money.
Yes, that's true. Thank you.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Doing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Excuse me.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. That's just back to Trans Mountain. When it was first proposed by Kinder Morgan, it was something like a $7 billion project, and it ballooned. It exploded. At the end, when it became operational, I think it was the May of 2024, like about 18 months ago, it became operational. It ballooned into like a $35 billion project. So an example of our government's inability to execute large projects efficiently. And the other thing that's always interesting about Trans Mountain, I often hear comments about this from Quebecers. Whenever I bring up equalization payments and how Alberta is there's a wealth transfer and we're sending money to Ottawa that is then being redistributed. The argument for what we receive from Ottawa is often the oil and gas subsidies, and people use Trans Mountain as an example of an oil and gas subsidy. I don't think it fits the definition of an oil and gas subsidy because it is a crown asset. It's something that the government of that Ottawa owns. So it wasn't given to anyone. It's owned by Ottawa. So to declare that as a subsidy is pretty, that's twisting the definition of a subsidy. As far as I'm concerned, a subsidy to the oil industry would be, loans or actual money invested or given as part of a grant or something like that. And you won't find a lot of that. There's not, I mean, sure, Ottawa will, there's small little oil and gas companies in Alberta that will take advantage of certain subsidies, certain tax credits for doing research and things like that. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of subsidies received by the oil industry. Another one that's commonly listed is that oil industry will have tax credits and capital gains exemptions and things like that. And I'm like, again, those are not subsidies. Those are taxes and credits available to any industry, to anybody deploying capital. So I don't like that argument. Just a reminder, folks. So yeah, please call. I mean, you don't have to ask me questions about LNG or the gun grab, which is the other topic we'll get to. But just hit me with any question. We don't have a sort of a proper functioning switchboard right now. So if you call and it's busy, that's because I'm talking to one person right now. But right now there's nobody on the line. So go ahead and give me a call. Otherwise, you keep making me do my little monologues. Trying to, sorry, something went down the wrong way here. I got a coffee, which is not quite a substitute for a bottle of water. I should have a bottle of water. Yeah. So, all right. Well, in that case, let's move on then to. I do want to move on to the gun grab, because of the two stories this week that were bugging me the most, the first one was the LNG one, but the other one is the gun grab. Now, if you're an Albertan and you're watching this show, I think there's probably a pretty high likelihood that you're a firearm owner. And we all know that about 5 years ago, Ottawa implemented a ban on what it calls assault style, not even assault anymore, it's assault style firearms. And the ban was to lower crime, which I don't see how that, we'll get to that. So they implemented the ban. Now, the ban in effect is an expropriation of property. And if you're and in this country, if you expropriate property from people, then you need to compensate them. Now, the ban went into effect in 2021, but ever since then, the government, all they've been able to tell us is hold on to your firearms, keep them stored downstairs, and don't use them. And you also can't transfer them. You can't pass them down to your kids. You can't sell them. You can't do anything. They're banned. Just hold on to them. We don't know what we're going to do with them. So now they're trying to develop this program where finally they would buy back the firearms from us. And that's what they're calling it. They're calling it a buyback program. And while they were preparing that program, they just kept extending an amnesty, because technically, as soon as that order in council came in 2021 saying these firearms were banned, anybody in possession of them was breaking the law. But there's an amnesty that goes on until the end of this year, until October 2026. That amnesty has been extended time and time and time again because the Liberals created a problem with this ban. So now they're finally getting into the stage where they're trying to figure out, they think they have an idea of how they're going to buy back the guns from the people who own them. And so they want us to register our guns. But I'll come back to that because I just see I got a call. So remember, I'll remember this point. So go ahead, whoever's on the line, name and where are you calling from, please?
My name is Max, and I'm calling from Calgary.
How you doing, Max?
I'm doing well, thank you. And I'll stay on your topic that you're talking about right now, Marty.
Okay.
But from what I've seen in world history, if they're coming to take away your guns and they're not going after criminals, that should tell you everything.
Yes.
I mean, that's straight path down to communism.
Yeah, no,
and then you have no way to defend yourself.
It never, yeah, any society that's given up their guns, the Chinese did it in whatever, the 1930s and 40s. I'm sure Cambodians wish that they had kept their guns before the Pol Pot regime. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So is that your premise then? That go ahead.
Yeah, my premise is that they're never the good guys if they're coming to take away your guns and they're censoring your speech.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pure evil. incarnate. Like, that's showing you their face. That's showing you their cards. I mean, and Carney's talking about building back faster than ever been seen before. He hasn't built a thing, but he's concentrated on taking away guns and censoring speech. That makes no sense.
Yeah. No, 100%. So appreciate that comment. So let me finish on that, expand on that. So they're trying to take away guns from law-abiding citizens. And right now they're asking law-abiding citizens to self-declare that they might have firearms on this list. And John, if you could just put up the screen. So there's a period right now. So there's a screenshot. There's a period right now for the next month where people are asked to submit or to self-register for this compensation program, and it's backfiring on the Liberals right now. That's a map of Canada. All told, there's about 30,000 people that have self-declared on that list. By all estimates, there's like over 1 million firearms that would be on that list. So it's an example of a policy that is absolutely backfiring on the Liberals, and there's going to be mass non-compliance to this policy, which I think is going to be, which I'm happy to see. I mean, I don't advocate breaking the law, but once in a while you have to do some civil disobedience. And I've been definitely advising people that there's an amnesty period that goes on until October this year. So why would you voluntarily submit yourself to this? This is an example of coercion. Along with this right now, anybody who's a firearm owner in Canada and has a possession and acquisition license is getting an email. They sent out mass emails in the last few days, ramping up the coercion. They're going to scare you into thinking that you need to turn in your firearm. Otherwise, this will happen. So just wanted to bring that up. And I agree with Max that, it's pretty telling when your government is coming after a measure that is completely unnecessary. Actually, let me add this to this. This is another kind of an interesting point with this whole program. The minister in charge of this, I always forget his name, Gary Enna, Sandy, whatever, like the long name minister. He's telling people that he expects Canadians to abide by the law, which we do. But at the same time, he's being a hypocrite, because when I wish I had it. I have it in my pocket here. I have my gun permit. But when I accepted my original gun permit, I accepted it with conditions, and I accepted to follow the law. So my gun permit says, use your gun in a responsible way at a gun range, doing this, don't shoot people with it, use it for whatever, you know what I mean? Store it this way. So we as Canadians, all Canadians that I know who are firearm owners respected the law. So they expect us to follow this law, but why did they not recognize the fact that we followed the law when they gave us the gun permits? So what that tells me is, in this country, if you follow the law, but they still want to do something like take away your guns or take away your speech, following the law is irrelevant, because they'll just move the goalposts. So that's what they're doing on this. They're just moving the goalposts. I mean, firearm owners, as far as I know, are some of the most law-abiding people. There's so many steps necessary to acquire a firearm in this country, and people keep going through those steps. So,
In common sense, Marty said, I think common sense says that if 100% of the Canadian population, never mind 100% of the Alberta future nation population, would totally agree with confiscating guns belonging to criminals.
Yep.
But to go after legal gun owners, that makes no sense. But the thing I wanted to talk to you about, you can go back to the guns later after we're done this call, but I was hoping you would be able to speak to this, because one of the things that I'm kind of getting mixed messages on when it comes to Alberta as an independent nation, and I'm very optimistic that we can do this and that we will do this, but would it be the next day after the vote that we would start using the U.S. currency as a transition currency, or would it be have to live with a depleted Canadian dollar, or until a new constitution is wrote? What are your thoughts on that?
All right, I'll answer that, but I'll ask a favor from you, if you don't mind hanging up on this one so that somebody else can get in queue. But appreciate the call.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is my understanding of it. I mean, if there's a referendum and it comes out positive and we want to be an independent nation, there is a period immediately after that. It's not like immediately after that, the next morning we're an independent nation. The next morning there's a lot of work to do, right? So the next morning we look at this and we go, holy smokes, we just voted to be independent. We need a leadership. You know, does Danielle Smith say, hey, I volunteer to start the negotiations and the next step? Or does Danielle step down or say something like, I'll step down as soon as there's another election and you choose a new leader? So I think there's a step like that. And then the new leader would have the task of working with the population and the MLAs and everybody else to redefine all those questions, right? What kind of how do we change our constitution? What currency do we adopt? Things like that. So I don't think we need to panic the day after the vote. And we certainly don't have the answers. So I think that's the way it's going to go. We're going to have a vote. We're going to be successful. I mean, I've been canvassing on the side of the road. So we're going to be successful. We're going to have a vote. And then after that, the real work starts, and we're going to have people, leaders step up. I honestly don't think it's going to be Danielle Smith in that case, because I think she's going to campaign for the no side. Go ahead. Who's on the line? Name, where are you calling from, please?
Hello, Jeff in GP.
GP, how's it going, Jeff?
Good. How are you?
Just for folks who might not be familiar, GP is Grand Prairie. Not every. I tend to. I've lived across the province. I am from up north, so I know all these places, right? But some people aren't familiar. So what's going on in GP, Jeff? Help us out.
Oh, lots of snow, and just enjoying your show. Another great one today, Marty. Thanks a lot. And I was hoping I could speak with in regards to the firearm regs. There's one thing that I think people don't understand quite often is that we are checked daily by the RCMP automatically for any kind of criminal offenses, activity, investigations, etc. If we are flagged, and it's an automated system, if we are flagged by our names with our PAL or PAL, and I'll explain to the viewers, or if you want to, what the difference is, they come for our guns, right? Period.
Yep. We're
not allowed to have them if you're on a conviction list. An RPAL is a restricted possession acquisition license, and a PAL is a possession acquisition license. The difference is restricted versus non-restricted. And that brings me to my point, and I'll be real quick. I know you want to get other callers. I implore everyone to look at the regulations that were enacted previous to May 1st, 2020. And let's just quick little history. May 1st, 2020, they created an order in council that transferred or now has created all of your non-restricted items at that particular time to prohibited, which means can't use and can't do it. But just a PSA, public service announcement here for everyone. If they review the regulations previous to May 1st, 2020, it's called, the regulations are SOR/2012-138. That's the non-restricted firearms regulations that were enacted. I think it was January 12th, 2020. In those regulations, it clearly states that, and this is important, everybody remember this. Section 2 states that it was not required for you to keep a record of your sale of non-restricted firearms.
Yep.
So what that means is, if you sold your gun previous to May 1st, 2020 to another PAL owner, now these are non-restricted only. Restricted is a totally different entity. I'm not talking about that. I'm only talking about non-restricted. Any non-restricted weapon you could sell to another PAL owner, and it was not required for you to keep a record of that sale. Take that information with what you will, everyone.
Yeah.
But that is what the regulations state.
Appreciate that insight and that context, Jeff. If you don't mind hanging up and letting somebody else call, but I'll just thanks for the comment. I'll add on that. He's right. So because there used to be thank you. There used to be this long gun registry, and some people are worried that that their firearms that they own are still registered somewhere. They shouldn't be, because when Harper came in, he abolished the long gun registry, and hopefully it's deleted, but you never know. But he is right. There was, since 2020, firearm owners were obligated to register their firearms. Most private guys never did, but definitely businesses did. So if you bought a firearm from a business like a Cabela's or Bass Pro Shop since 2021, there's a pretty good chance that it's registered somewhere. It still would be tough for the government. I mean, I don't want to get into all those details, but it would be tough for the government to know what we have or what people have that are on that list. I mean, that's one of the problems the government passed. It's voluntary. They want us to turn in firearms that they put on this list. And I think it's just going to create a big, giant mess for them. Ultimately, I keep saying they should just drop this gun ban because it's bad legislation. It's bad policy. It doesn't address the problems that they claim it addresses. I mean, it doesn't do anything for reducing crimes. The firearms, the proof is the fact that we haven't been able to use these firearms since they've been banned, and people have complied with the order. So people are complying with the order. People complied with the regulations beforehand. I mean, I'm on the record. I have a restricted firearm, and I only use it at the gun range. And since 2021, I haven't used it anywhere. So we're in compliance with it. So I think the government's best bet forward is to just reverse this bad policy. Now, I'm hoping simultaneously, Jeff's bringing up some good points. One of the things about Alberta here is we do have a reasonable chief firearms officer, and we do have Danielle on board saying that she's not going to allow, 800,000 Albertans to suddenly become criminals at the drop because of a piece of paper. So she's got something planned. They're preparing something along the lines of Alberta issuing its own firearms permits or something like that to make sure that we don't all suddenly become criminals if this amnesty is finally, lifted. So we'll see how that goes. So yeah, don't be shy, folks. Give us a call. While we're on the topic of Danielle, let's keep talking about Danielle a little bit. So on Thursday last week, when I did the show, I knew that there was a press conference in the afternoon, and I suspected she was going to talk about immigration. She leaked it out, right? Her chief of staff, Rob, leaked it out. So true to what we expected, I think she dropped a pretty important, a pretty nasty bomb on us on Thursday when she announced that she was going to do a referendum in October on a whole bunch of questions, including immigration. And I think that really muddles the water. But I got a call on the line. So go ahead, name and where you're calling from, please.
Sorry, I'm just going to turn this off. Debbie from Whitecourt.
Hi, Debbie.
How are you today?
Good. I have family in Whitecourt, right?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
So I have a comment first.
Okay.
That irritates me is how can the government buy back something they never sold me? For one. But my question is, based on the amount of money they've already spent, and the average from what they say is $1,800. If you do the math, they don't have enough to buy a quarter of our firearms back.
Correct.
Not that I want to sell.
Correct. So, okay, to your first point, yes, I thank you for reminding us of that. They want to buy back something that they didn't sell to us. I bought my firearm, you bought yours from Cabela's, and now the government wants to buy it back. No, they don't want to buy it back. They want to buy it from us. And what's really upsetting is they're going to buy it from us with their own money, right? So I'm going to send taxes to Ottawa, and then Ottawa is going to give me back my taxes and then take away my gun. I mean, I might as well pay my taxes with a gun at this point. So, yeah. And sorry, and what was the second part of your, the cost? You're right. So yeah, they've even announced that, right? They said that they've set aside, I don't quote me exactly, but something like $730 million to do this. And you've done the math, right? If there's 500,000 firearms at $1,800 a piece, it's more than the 700 million. That's why they're trying to scare us right now into registering for this buyback, because they're saying that there might not be enough money, and if you don't pre-register, you won't qualify. I think it's a giant scare tactic. And we also, we spoke earlier about the original long gun registry that was sold to Canadians as like, oh, that's only going to cost like $2-3 million. It cost billions of dollars for the original long gun registry.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, great question. Thanks, Debbie. How's the weather up there? Good in Whitecourt?
Yeah, it's good for winter. Could be worse.
Yeah, could be worse. All right, awesome. Thanks for calling.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and back to the buyback program, they rolled it out. So one of the tests they did recently was they did a little pilot of it in Cape Breton, and it's never a coincidence with the Liberals, right? So they picked Cape Breton, somewhere where the fire chief, or not the fire chief, the police chief was literally related to somebody in higher up in government. So they did the test of the pilot there, and something like 23 people signed up for the buyback. No, not 23. 23 rifles were registered for the buyback in Cape Breton, and I think something like 12 or 13 of them came from one person. So it's the fact that they're pushing ahead, but I'm not surprised. I mean, how often do we ever hear our governments say that they made a mistake and want to reverse a law? All they'll do is just double down, and try to wear us down. So, yeah, I think we exhausted the gun debate. So, what else have I got on my list of things? So I was talking about Danielle Smith, right? So Danielle did this announcement. Now, to me, the announcement is I still hear, when it comes to Danielle and some of the things she's done lately, I still hear two thoughts, right? One is she's doing due diligence so that she can act on something. And I hear that. And then on the other side, I hear she's doing due diligence. I also hear that she's perhaps naive in thinking. And then I also hear that she's been compromised. So on this announcement, I don't buy the due diligence anymore. Like we've made it clear, the leadership, the membership of the UCP has made a pretty clear path for her at the AGMs that immigration was an issue that needs to be addressed. And she also heard it loud and clear at throughout the summer when she was doing her Alberta Next panels. Immigration came out all the time. So did other issues, right? Should we take control of an Alberta pension plan? Maybe a little more contentious. Should we have our own Alberta police force? Yes. So she's heard that over and over, and I don't think she needs a referendum for the mandate to do that. She's been elected. She's heard what's going on, and she should do it. So I don't buy this idea that she's holding these referendums in October as a way to check off that she's done absolutely everything she needs to do for due diligence. Because and in fact, I always bring up the example. Does anybody honestly think that if Naheed Nenshi got elected tomorrow, that he would do? I don't know what his weird policy might be. Is he going to do a bunch of due diligence to find out if Albertans want to shut down coal plants or do whatever? No, he's going to do it. So why would a politician like Danielle hold herself to a much higher level of accountability and due diligence than her opponents? So I don't buy that. To me, the referendum that she's proposing with all the questions, that's just to confuse that's just to distract from the independence movement, and that's just to confuse people during that referendum. All right, I got another call on the line. Go ahead, please. Name, where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm Jerry, and I'm from Calgary.
Okay, welcome to the show.
And I was kind of wondering, because the LNG thing that's been reported right now, it's kind of odd because I'm originally born in Newfoundland, but I've been here in Alberta for probably 30 years now. But to my knowledge, why are we not consuming the oil and gas from the East Coast? And everybody's kind of questioning why we're not getting it from Alberta. We have two oil patches here in Canada. One has to be massive, but the other one is still in function, kind of, even with all the legislation that the Liberals are putting forward. Because I just recently watched the representatives from Newfoundland get up and ask why they're being strangled just like Alberta. I mean, that's the premise that we're not using our own supplies is baffling to me.
Well, good question. I can't speak for Newfoundland specifically. I suspect Newfoundland's producing a lot of oil, right? The Hibernia and offshore, there's some good oil there. And I know there's refineries in Newfoundland. So I kind of think Newfoundland is actually producing its oil and using enough locally and then exporting the rest. Definitely Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Quebec all have gas. A little bit less oil, but Quebec in particular has gas, and Quebec has been, I think for Quebec in particular, it's clear that they're not producing their gas because it would increase the province's capacity to generate money, which would negatively impact its ability to get transfer payments through equalization. So I think Quebec is, I lived it. I worked for that same company, Paraday, that did the Nova Scotia project. We drilled wells in Quebec and we got expropriated. The Quebec government is against developing its gas resources. Totally, 100%. So it's political.
I'm aware of it just because I spent 3 years actually out in Montreal before I moved to this beautiful province. But I'm aware of why they're holding back those numbers, because it makes it look better on their reports and stuff, so they can get a bigger chunk of pie. I mean, they also don't add in Hydro-Quebec into their numbers either, saying that's a win for the province. So I mean, it's stupid all around as far as I'm concerned. Most of these policies are up your ass. Stupid.
Great comment. And then Newfoundlanders, we all know, right? You guys get you get the short end of the stick on a really bad deal for selling your hydropower through Labrador and down into I don't know the specific details of that one, but I know there's a lot of bad blood between Newfoundland and Quebec when it comes to hydro production.
Oh yeah, I'm aware of that one, but that contract, that ran out years ago. So I mean, Quebec has no say in what we produce for energy anymore. They don't own that contract. As far as I know, they didn't even renew it.
Yeah. Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks for the call.
Labrador selling their electricity down to New York, as far as I know.
Through Quebec, though, right? That's my understanding. There's no direct line.
Quebec,
yeah. Excellent. Okay, well, thanks.
They're probably using transmission fees and stuff to get a little money, but Quebec has no say in what the Newfoundland government is doing with their energy. Right?
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
Yeah. And all these things bring up, this reminds me again that, we came together as one of the reasons we came together as provinces to form this thing called Confederation was to facilitate trade among ourselves. And that was the number one thing we were sold on, right? Come together, different provinces, different regions, come together under the umbrella of Ottawa, and they'll facilitate trade. And 150 years later, I find that's the most that's the worst aspect of our country, is that we actually block each other's efforts. I can't buy wine from BC without jumping through hoops, and you can get in trouble for buying beer in Nova Scotia and crossing the border into Quebec, and Quebec is not buying Alberta oil, but you know what I mean? So it's one more reason why I personally don't think that Confederation, the way it was designed, is working very well. I think it's more of a failed experiment, but that's my opinion. Go ahead on the line, name and where you're calling from, please.
Yes, I'm Steve. You know me as Canadian Spider-Man with Clyde. I'm calling from, hello, Marty. Good to hear you.
Yeah.
I'm calling from just outside of Vernon in the woods here in BC. But I'm calling because I grew up in New Brunswick. I spent 27 years there. And I think that there are a lot of hardworking people in New Brunswick. I know that. But there's a lot of people that take advantage of the system. And I work in construction there. Part of your job is to go on the dole for all winter. And so I think that if they were forced, if the equalization payments were cut, they would be forced to be more industrious. They do have resources there. And I think people would really get off their ass and produce. They have that ability. That was my only question. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind hanging up, Steve, appreciate the
Sure.
call, and then I'll let somebody else call in. But no,
Sure.
lots of
Thank you,
people.
Marty.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Lots of people agree with you. I agree with you. I think equalization might have started out as a good idea to, it was kind of an insurance policy when some province had experienced a little bit of a downturn. Sure, it got help. And equalization started about 50 plus years ago, right? In the 1960s. It's become a program now, and it's created a welfare mentality. I 100% agree that we should just eliminate the whole equalization program and rethink it. We should just have an insurance policy in the background, but not automatic, right? Maybe we all throw in money and keep it for a rainy day fund when the province needs it. In fact, we don't need an equalization. I mean, we can help each other out in times of need without having an equalization program. So I 100% agree that if we cancel the equalization program, some people would. And it's not just New Brunswick; it's across the board, right? I'm on the record as saying that. Not just saying it, I can demonstrate it. I can demonstrate by many measures that Canadians have become unproductive in the last 30 years. Like our GDP per capita, productivity per hour is just stagnating and going down. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of them I think are bad policies. That I mean, Steve mentioned the dole. Like it's become part of the system where you work 6 months or whatever, and then you go and collect the welfare, and then somebody else works. I mean, that's institutionalized welfare, and it's not working. Speaking of statistics, that was another one that was interesting that came out this morning. Employment numbers for December came out, and turns out that in December, I got it on a sheet of paper. We lost about 23,000 jobs in December, which means that for the entire year, on a year-over-year basis, Canada lost 35,000 jobs in 2025. So we're not creating jobs anymore. It's been like that now. The economy stalled. The Canadian economy is stalled, right? By every metric that matters. GDP per capita, productivity, jobs created, revenue, all sorts of things. By every measure, the economy is stalling, which I find it so fascinating how people are still apparently Carney is trending positively in the polls, and I fail to see how people can't put one and one together, that their lives are tougher now than they were in 2014, but somehow or other they're still willing to give a pass to the Liberals. In fact, did you guys see? It might be difficult for John to bring it up, but I'll tell you to go look for it. I mean, there was an exchange in the House of Commons yesterday where Pierre Poilievre said something about the economy being stalled and blaming the Liberals, and Carney said, well, you can't blame me. I've only been here for a year. And he got this huge applause from his backbench. And then he followed it up by saying the member opposite, Pierre, has been here for 11 years, as if he was blaming Pierre Poilievre for the woes of the country, because Pierre happens to have been, does he not understand that Pierre was an opposition member of parliament and not designing the policies? I mean, it's a pure example of really ugly gaslighting. I wasn't here. I only showed up this year. By the way, and we all know this, right? Carney plays that game that he's only been here for whatever a year, which, by the way, in the last year, what has he actually accomplished? It's nothing. But we all know he was advising Trudeau behind the scenes as far back as 2020. So Carney cannot simply say he's new to the scene. He's been around for a while, and he's one of the reasons the country is so messed up right now. Call in with that one, folks. What's your thoughts on the economy? What's your thoughts on Danielle? So am I off base on this one, where Danielle is doing just this referendum to confuse us? Because I want to go back. I don't want to repeat too much of this, because I know Corey and others cover this topic in depth. I mean, Corey Morgan is the expert when it comes to separatism and those kinds of things. I'm just a guy on the street corner collecting signatures. But my understanding of the Clarity Act is exactly that. The question asked in the referendum has to be brutally clear, can't be confusing. So to me, if Danielle has a referendum in October and there's an independence question, but there's also a question, if there's a question that says, do you want to separate? But underneath it, there's a question that says, do you want to continue to try and negotiate a better deal on immigration with Ottawa? And do you want to try and negotiate a better deal on pensions? And do you want to do this? To me, that becomes confusing if there's 4 or 5 questions on the ballot. So I in the back of my mind, Danielle should not have muddied the waters with that. She should have left she should have actually, before she made that announcement, she should have just waited another couple of weeks or a couple of months. In 2 months, we will have the results of the current independence petition put forward by Stay Free Alberta and Mitch Sylvester. And then we will also have the one from Thomas Lukasik from a while ago. So then, why muddle the waters now when she could have waited a couple of months to see what's going on? By the way, did you guys, at first I was a little bit on the, I got ahead of myself. I mentioned Mitch Sylvester. I saw the story yesterday of Mitch Sylvester being threatened indirectly in his store. Somebody walked into Mitch's store and apparently put a bullet on the counter and said, this bullet's for you. Now, Mitch wasn't there, but it scared his clerk. And then, there was a search for the individual, and then some people claimed to know who it was. And then there was some backpedaling, and people tried to make it sound like, oh, it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bullet. It was a pen shaped like a bullet, all sorts of things like that. I always think that there's 2 sides to the story, but based on what I've seen lately, I'm fully on board. I absolutely believe Mitch when he says somebody put a bullet on the counter and uttered those words. It's on video. And I think somebody's trying to backpedal after the fact, claiming, oh, it was just a joke. That's no joke, folks. That's a genuine threat. And I've seen that kind of stuff before. And I actually saw it recently. I mean, I'm on the side of the road collecting or going door to door and setting up pop-ups and collecting signatures. And I've seen things that are close to threats, right? And along those lines, like even if it was a fake bullet, like if you put a fake bullet, you can have a bullet where that's already, there's no primer in it or something like that. It's no different than me walking into a bank with a replica handgun and saying, this is a stick up, give me your money. And then I get caught by the police a week later and I go, oh, it was a joke. It was just a replica gun. It was a joke. It was just a replica bullet. No. It doesn't work that way. So that guy got caught. And I think it's disturbing that somebody would threaten somebody else just for having an opinion and supporting a referendum. Another caller on the line. Go ahead, please. Name, where are you from?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, Marty. How are you?
Good. What's your name?
My name is Diane. I'm in Florida right now, but I'm from Ontario, originally from Windsor, and I live in Alberta now, thank God.
Well, you live in Florida today, but what's on your mind, Diane?
Today.
Yeah.
Well, I was disappointed in the situation with Danielle. And I like her, and I think she's a very smart person. But I'm disappointed with all of those questions that are going to be, hopefully not. We'll have to see what happens. But I don't like the idea of all of those other questions, those referendum questions. I don't really think that's right that they should be on the separation, with the separation.
No, I appreciate that. I agree. Stay on the line, Diane. So we saw on the news lately, a lot of Albertans, snowbirds tend to go on the western side of the U.S., right? They go to Phoenix and they go to Yuma and places like that. There was a fantastic signature collection event in Yuma. Have you seen one down in Florida in your neck of the woods?
No. I'm only here for a little while. and I'll be heading back to Alberta. So I'll sign in Alberta.
Yeah, but
But
so
I did hear about that, and I was surprised. I thought that was awesome, and I do know a lot of Albertans go to Arizona and not to Florida.
yeah,
Florida's more a Ontario thing.
right on. Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
where in Alberta normally are you?
Just outside of Edmonton.
Okay, so you're coming back to the cold then. It's still winter up in Edmonton. It's nice here in Calgary, but it's still winter in Edmonton. Awesome. Thanks for calling down.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
Yeah,
Take care of yourself.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, that was quite the event in Yuma. Again, it made the news, and people don't want to. People see it with their own eyes, but they want to blow it off and say it's a non-event. I mean, I seen the video. Actually, wasn't that video from Yuma? I think it came from Corey Morgan's relatives or somebody like that, if I remember correctly. And it was a big event, right? It was 300 signatures were collected in Yuma. I'll give this quick update. So I am a canvasser. I have been collecting signatures. Now I saw online, I'm canvasser number, 3,600. I saw somebody posted a picture online, they're number 5,200. I've heard through channels that there's upwards of 6,000 canvassers and they're trying to get to 10,000. That's amazing. So we're all over the province, right? And everybody's collecting their own signatures. This weekend was the first time that my coordinator, the guy who gives me the forms and looks after me as a canvasser, he has a little group of 30 of us. So he gathered us all together and he collected the forms from us. And out of the 30 of us, we collected 7,200 signatures. So you do the math, right? That's like that's 250 signatures times 30 gets you to the 7,300 or whatever. And we're just 30. Multiply that by 100, more than 100. Multiply that by 200 because that's how many canvassers are out there. I think we're past the threshold. I hope that the Stay Free Alberta group will finally publish a number or an update, see where we are with the signature collections. If they don't, I understand it. I mean, there's two schools of thoughts, right? The leave your opponents guessing, I guess, is one school of thought. But the other one to me is, as an engineer driven by data and goals, I like the idea of seeing a goal, and you could put a reach, right? I mean, the goal officially, the threshold is 177,000 signatures, but the Mitch Sylvester, the petitioner, could put a goal out there, 500,000, and put it as a target, and then have people driven to achieve that goal. So I can see it both ways. It's not my decision, but I personally, I'd like to see an update on where we are with the signatures. All right, well, we're almost running out of time here. If there's one more person who calls in, we got a couple of minutes we could have. Otherwise, I'll finish it off by saying I hope you guys are enjoying the show. I'm getting familiar with the format now. I think the call-in's working, the microphone, the headphones are working for me. Everything's good. I look forward to this show every week. Getting some awesome feedback from folks online. Folks in person, actually, somebody came out to my canvassing location a couple of days ago and said they just wanted to come chat to me. So you guys have figured it out. I like chatting. And so don't be shy. Keep calling in. I got to do the little plug here. So I encourage you guys that probably if you're watching right now, you're already a member of the Western Standard. But if you're not, get yourself a subscription. It's $10 a month, or you can get one for the whole year for $100. It's www.westernstandard.news. And otherwise, yeah, stay tuned. See you next week. Make sure you're here again, same time every week, 1 p.m. on. Do I take the last call, John? I'll take that very last call real quick. It's got to be quick. Go ahead.
Hey, Marty.
Yeah.
It's Caroline in Fort McMurray. I'm a process engineer turned stay-at-home mom, which is the best job move I've ever made. But you had a post, I think, yesterday about how, there's lots of women have told your wife over the years that she was missing out big time by staying home and raising her family. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on, what can we do in an independent Alberta to kind of change some of that mindset and encourage moms to stay home and encourage young families to have more kids?
Fantastic question. I think it'll naturally, I think people naturally want to, couples naturally have different roles. And I think a lot of people would love to be able to have a stay at home parent, whether it's the man or the woman. I think families are important to humans, and we want somebody. I think lately in the last 20 or 30 years, the cost of living is one of the things that have made that impossible. And that's why people are both working and having smaller families. And so I think the number one thing that we won't even need a policy. It'll adjust itself. And independent Alberta will leave people with more money in their pockets. And when people have more money in their pockets, then somebody will stay home and look after the kids, or there'll be but there'll be a bigger family and there'll be more family time. So I think that's the simple answer to that question. It'll it'll fix itself as a problem because you'll have more money in your pocket. Do you agree? Do you think is that fair? Oh, she might have.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, why'd you make the jump while you're on here? Like, why did you leave work and go and become a mom?
Yeah, it's just, it's something I always wanted to do ever since I was little. And obviously, I was successful working as an engineer, but it's way more fulfilling being at home for sure.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, it's people like you. I mean, you spread that news, spread that message, and I'm sure you meet other people. But yes, I'll go with my original answer. An independent Alberta will leave more money in people's pockets, and then we're protecting ourselves and our culture. And part of our culture here in Alberta is we still have larger families. I mean, I have 4 kids. I think I'm an example of that. We tend to have bigger families in Alberta. All right, folks, thanks for calling. I think that's it for the time. So we'll see you guys next week at the same time, 1 p.m. here on Thursday next week. Cheers, everyone.